Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, fireman's pants. Yeah, I said it, fireman's pants. Today we're going to make this old pair of fireman's bunker gear into a knife. How cool is that? So, backstory. About 2 years ago, a viewer named Andrew Isaac sent me a great idea for a knife. Now, he'd been a fireman for like 25 years, and he'd kind of distilled his experience into an idea for a wrecking knife. You know, something to carry on the job that you could pry with and not tear the tip off of, that maybe you could cut seat belts and stuff like that. So today I'm going to butcher his basic idea for that design. Now, he had also sent me some old bunker gear, which is fireman speak for pants. So before we get started on the knife, what's the deal with those pants? What are we going to do with them? Well, we're going to turn these pants into a facsimile of micarta, a laminate material beloved by custom knife makers for making knife handles. Kevlar, huh? Yeah, your handle will now be literally bulletproof, figuratively speaking. I'm going to go ahead and blitzkrieg through the micarta part of this because I've got a whole video devoted to making homebrew micarta. Link in the cards in the description so you can pick up the details there. But here's the basic process. First, poor old bunker gear has to sacrifice its life as I whack it up into square sections with a pair of scissors. Then I'll whip up some engineered polymer solution, also known as Bondo, the magic substance that keeps every car in Appalachia from falling apart. Now, I recommend keeping extra gloves handy because this stuff is amazingly sticky. It just gets everywhere. I also recommend mixing in a beer cup from a minor league baseball park. Of course, all the ancient sages agree that all life experiences are improved by the addition of minor league baseball. Anyway, I seem to do this slightly differently every time, but the idea here is that you want to stack up the fabric, completely permeating it with the fiberglass resin. You can dredge it or paint it on like I'm doing it here, whatever. The key point is you want to avoid bubbles and you need to completely soak the cloth. Now I'm clamping them together between big old chunks of aluminum. You want something really flat and as rigid as possible so that you get consistent thickness and a nice flat surface. I'll let my pants carta cure while I turn to the making of the knife itself. For the blade, I'm using S30V, one of my favorite stainless steels. I use it on most of my Tactics Armory knives. Okay, so I'll begin by drilling holes for the handle. Everybody does this different ways, but I drill now because it's easier to clamp everything, to maintain squareness, and just generally to keep everything straight by drilling the holes at the beginning. Now, of course, in order to do that, I have to know exactly where I'm going. I'm using my mill for the job. It's worth mentioning at this point that this is a pretty advanced build. Sometimes I do knife builds using extremely simple hand tools, but unfortunately not today. Here's the design for the knife. As you can see, it's got a blunt tip both for prying and, I presume, for cutting seat belts and other things of that nature without any danger of impaling somebody while you're trying to free them from a wreck. It also has a window breaker on the handle. Okay, now that we've got the holes, I'll shape the profile of the knife on the belt grinder. I'm using a slightly worn 40 grit ceramic belt to hog off material as fast as possible. I don't want to use a brand new one because it strips off a lot of those abrasives. As per the plans, it'll have a blunt chisel type tip in the front. Incidentally, if you want to try your hand at this, the plans will be available to all my Patreon subscribers. I've got plans for tons of my projects there. If that kind of thing floats your boat, you can find the link in the cards and the description. Then it's time to grind the bevels. This is much like grinding a Tonto style blade if you've ever done that. In either case, grinding a really straight grind line like this is very technically challenging. You can make it a little easier using a jig, but even that's not a perfect solution. Going slow and being careful is the best way to make sure that that grind line is really clean. Then I'll grind the tip. So as we grind these bevels, there'll actually be two main bevels, one along the main cutting edge and then one on that chisel tip in the front. Once I've established the angle in that tip grind, I'll feather it in gently and then really concentrate hard on maintaining that angle. I've scribed lines all the way along the edge of the knife, and if you just work perfectly down to those lines, the grinds will come out nice and clean and at the correct angle. Initially I did this with 3 bevels or facets or whatever you want to call it. I didn't really like how that intermediate facet came out. The difference between the two was so fine that it just didn't differentiate very well. So I blended in this corner into a curve and made it much smoother ultimately. After repeating the process on both sides, I'll move up to higher grit belts. Everybody has their own way of working higher grits, but I like structured abrasives for tricky grinds like this. They're forgiving and less likely to dig in on the corners of the platen, which lessens the likelihood of wobbly lines. I'll also facet the glass breaker here on the handle. Now it's on to heat treating. I'll be heat treating mine in my electric oven, but if you want to do a project like this, there are professional heat treaters who cater to hobbyist knife makers and can heat treat your knives for you. The blade's wrapped in a high temperature stainless steel foil, which will mostly at least keep air out and keep the oxidization of the steel to a minimum. Because this is going to be tailored for prying and things of that nature, I'm going to temper it slightly softer than I would a normal knife. This will have the effect of making it less brittle and therefore less likely to snap when used for prying. I'm tempering it for 2 cycles at 475 Fahrenheit rather than my normal 400 or so. Just a little footnote on the term tempering. Many people use the term tempering to describe the process of hardening steel. Now, in the good old days, smiths often used the term this way, but in modern technical usage, this is not correct. Hardening is hardening, or quenching, it's sometimes called, and this is followed by a second heat treating process which softens the steel slightly, reducing the brittleness which comes as a result of the natural hardening process, and that part is the one that's actually called tempering. When you harden steel, you'll typically produce an extremely thin bark of oxidized steel, which you want to get rid of. I'll use a surface grinder to give the flats a nice clean surface. If you do this at home, you can rub it back and forth on sandpaper using some sort of very flat surface as a base. A scrap of masonite or other countertop material, glass, or MDF will all work. Then it's back to the grinder to clean up the bevels. Our Micarta has now cured into a nice hard sheet of durable laminate material. We'll hack it up into scale blanks on the bandsaw. Once they're squared off, you'll need to drill holes matching the holes on the tang. Hey kids, here's the fun part. So I'm using a fastener regimen on this handle, which I've never showed before, for reasons I'll kind of explain as I go. This right here is a threaded standoff. It's a 1/4 inch in thickness and a 1/4 inch long, and it has an 832 internal thread. This means that you can put it in the middle of the handle and then tighten down fasteners with 832 threads from each side and screw the handle together. Here's the trick though. You'll only see these on very thick knives. The reason for this is that there's just not enough space to fit the standoff. That's this little sucker right here, which goes in the middle of the knife, and then the shank of the bolt, which is there, you're screwing that in there, and then the head of the fastener itself. To get all that sandwiched into a handle, it's got to be a very thick handle, and it ideally should be a pretty thick piece of steel. Now, I've showed about 80 different ways of drilling handle scales in various videos. For something like this that has really precise layout of the all these little parts, and they all have to fit together, the easiest way to do it is on a mill using a digital readout, so that's the way I'm going to do it. I like doing sort of lower tech approaches so that everybody can figure out how to do it in their place, but this is one of those where that's just not the ideal way to do it. So, all right, let's jump on in. Now, the holes in the tang are 3.000 inches apart, so I just drill 3.000 spaced holes on the scales, and they'll drop right into place. There's also a lanyard hole, same deal, using the magic of thousandths to guarantee freshness. Now the lanyard hole is going to be a 1/4 inch hole rather than the smaller clearance holes, 11/64 inch holes that I used for the bolts. Because I'm screwing the fasteners into this little threaded standoff, and the standoff is actually thicker than my knife, I need to provide room for that. So I'll use an end mill to plunge about 50 thousandths deep into the 2 fastener holes. As a general rule, end mills don't like to be used as drills, but in a comparatively soft material like micarta, not a problem at all. Finally, I'll countersink the holes on the outer face of the scales with an 82-degree included angle countersink for the fastener head to seat in. Then I'll screw it all together. After that, I'll head to the grinder where I'll trim the whole thing to the profile of the handle. Now I'll need to disassemble the blade and radius the handle scales to make them comfortable to use. Due to all this assembly, disassembly, reassembly, rigmarole, all these different holes and countersinks that I have to drill, this particular technique is just really not ideal for custom knives. Not unless they're big, thick ones. You know, I've shown at least 20 different ways to attach handle scales over the years in my videos, and I would recommend this as about the 39th best choice among them. Very complex, fiddly approach to use on a knife like this. Like I say, very niche-y production knife type approach. That said, if you have a cool fastener, it looks awesome. However, if your bolt is some kind of flat drive Home Depot special, it looks like garbage. And now we'll install the lanyard tube or thong tube. Once it goes in there, we'll expand the tube a little bit using an arbor press. So there we go, ready to head out and fight fires. Huge thanks to Andrew Isaacs for suggesting this project, and my apologies to him for taking so freaking long to get it done. Fun project, cool knife made out of pants. What could be better? All right, thanks guys, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make Hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make Hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.